The Automated Transaction Task Template setting is the setting responsible for automating the core of RBO, which is transaction management. With this setting you can create automated tasks that trigger into the transaction based on certain transaction key dates. To start customizing your transaction task templates, from the menu click on this setting option as shown here. Once you select this option you will see default transaction tasks in the right-hand side of the page. Please note that within this setting, tasks are organized in alphabetical order, but inside the transaction they are organized by due date. The best way to identify the tasks that have been created for the different scenarios is to use the two drop-downs provided as a guide. So what is a scenario? A scenario is basically a transaction type and an agent role in a transaction, such as listing agent or buyer's agent. In the next couple of slides you will see how you can add a task in RBO and associate it to many scenarios. To see the tasks created for the different scenarios, first select a transaction type from the drop-down in the left, as shown here. Next, in the drop-down to the right, select an agent role. Once you do this, we will show you underneath the two drop-downs, a list of all of the different tasks that you have created for the selected scenario. In this example, the scenario is that is a residential sale and the agent is a listing agent. From this view, you can also see the task name, and when it triggers. You can also see when the task becomes due. For example, the task highlighted becomes due 3 days after acceptance date of the contract. At this point, if you notice that in the task list, there is a task missing, that you would like to add for the selected scenario, all you need to do is click on the Add Transaction Task option in the right-hand side of this page, as shown here. Once you do that, a pop-up will show, where you can add a new transaction task. In the first field of the pop-up, you will add a description of the task to be completed, as shown here. Remember, with RBO tasks templates are not only used to let users know which documents you want him or her to upload, but for everything else as well, such as the contacts you want them to add to the transaction, or the other regular tasks you want them to complete, or suggest they do, such as ordering a for sale sign for a new listing. In the second option of the pop-up you will need to say, if the task you are adding requires a document. If it does, the agent or admin responsible for completing the task will have to link the task to the document it belongs to, in order to check off the task as complete. This is a great option which ensures that tasks that require documents are not checked off without really being completed. Next you will need to select the task type. There are several to choose from, but basically any task that is mandatory. Your agents will not be able to delete from the transaction task list. Any other task status will allow your agents to delete the task from within the transaction. Next you will need to select who is responsible for completing the transaction task. Tasks can be assigned to the transaction agent, any admin, specific admins, or anyone. Only the person or group of persons responsible for completing the task will be able to check off the task as complete inside the transaction. After you assign the task for someone to complete, you can also decide if the task requires admin review. Here you can select the following options: task does not require review, anyone reviews, or specific admins review. When a task requires review and the person responsible for completing checks off the task as complete, the checkbox for the task turns red, and the task will be in review status. If you decide that the task requires review, you will also be given an option for the admins responsible for reviewing the task to receive an email, alerting them that an agent just completed a task that requires their review. You would of course only want to select this option if the task completed is a very important one, such as an uploaded purchase contract and so on. Please note that if you do not want to be bothered with email alerts, you will always know when a task requires review because, as mentioned earlier, all tasks that require review when checked, the checkbox turns red and will not ultimately be marked as complete until the person responsible for reviewing the task marks it as reviewed. Next is where the magic happens. Here you will be able to set the due date of a task. For example, the task we just added requires the agent to upload a listing agreement, so we say that the task becomes due 1 day after listing date. If the task required a purchase contract instead, we would probably want to select that the task will become due 1 day after acceptance date. There are many trigger dates to choose from, so make sure you select the trigger that makes the most sense for the task you are adding. For example, you will never make a purchase contract due days after the listing date because The agent should not have a purchase contract at that time. Only after an acceptance date will an agent have a purchase contract. In the final step, you will need to select all of the different scenarios for which the task you just added is applicable for. Now, I don't want to confuse you with this, because in the beginning of this tutorial we said you would be using the drop-downs as your guide for adding tasks, and that you would be adding a task for the selected scenario in the drop-downs, and yes, that stands correct, but the truth of the matter is that when adding the task, in addition to adding the task to the selected scenario, you can also associate it to other scenarios it might be applicable for. This is great because by doing this, you will not have to repeat a task over and over again which might be in common with other scenarios. Once complete, click Save in the bottom right-hand side of the pop-up as shown here. You will now see the task you just added listed in the list of tasks for the selected scenario. But remember, when we were adding the task, we also made it applicable to other scenarios, so if you switch scenarios in the drop-downs, you will see the task now part of the other scenarios it is applicable for as well. And last but not least, if you ever need to edit or delete an automated transaction task, please click on the 3 vertical dots to the right of the task as shown here for those options. Thanks for watching.